Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second and final public meeting for the Village of Rustburg Route 24 Corridor Study. I'm Ada Hunsberger from the Central Virginia Planning District Commission. Just want to introduce our staff on the call today. We have Mr. Paul Harvey from Campbell County. We have David Cook from VDOT. And we have Bill Wench, Phil White, and Jeannie Alexander from EPRPC, who's the consultant helping us with the study. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate any information that you can help us out with. Next slide. So just a few reminders here, some housekeeping things. To mute and unmute yourself, there's a small green icon on the right-hand side of your screen. You're also able to use the chat feature or the question feature for questions and answers. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the meeting, feel free to put those in the questions box and we'll respond to them as we go along. The purpose of this meeting really is to go over the potential improvements to the corridor and gain any more public feedback that we can. So we hope this is helpful for you, and I'm going to turn it over to our friends from EPR.
Okay, well, thanks, Ada. Start talking about the project here. A little background: the project or the study is being conducted with VDOT funds administered by the Central Virginia TPO, Transportation Planning Organization. Really what inspired the study is that, the area is growing, the region's growing, and traffic volumes are picking up, and they're going to continue to get higher into the future. So we want to get out in front of some of that with thinking about what types of improvements may be needed to address things such as congestion, traffic safety, the ability to walk and bicycle through the village there. So at the end of this process, we're going to identify various improvements, projects, which will then be the first step towards informing grant applications and finding funding to implement some of these opportunities and improvements. So this just illustrates kind of the process here. So we start with planning on the left, identifying needs. We start to flesh that out into some amount of detail and some cost estimates. From there, we look for funding, the dollar signs there. And then through time, once we find funding, we can implement the projects and build some improvements. So this is just the starting point. And as many of you may know, it's often a long process to get the funding and do the design work and do the construction. But here's where it starts. Bill?
Sure. So I'll just go over the first public meeting that we had and the results from the first public survey. Before I start with that, though, I'll just quick poll. Should see a question pop up on your screen asking if you participated in the first survey or not. Give you a few seconds to respond to that. It's like a few more people can vote if they want to. Go ahead and got one more vote. Oh, another one coming in under the wire. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll. And as you can see, it looks like about 30% of the attendees tonight did not take the first public meeting. So this will be useful to go over the results from that survey, and it'll prime you because the upcoming survey is in the same format. They both use this MetroQuest format, the same number of screens, similar types of questions. And I'm going to go over in brief the kind of the the big key takeaways from the first survey, but you can find a full summary at the project website, which is at the CVTPO, the main website. Under plans and programs and studies, there's a page with the project name Village Highway Study. Okay, so in terms of who took the survey, 80% of respondents use the corridor on a daily basis for a range of activities. Almost half of respondents use the corridor to commute to and from work. About a quarter use the corridor to run errands like shopping. That's right in the downtown of the village. There's a lot of different land uses on either side of the road, a lot of places to go. And about 16% of respondents just use the corridor to pass through, maybe on the way to Lynchburg or down south. In terms of the issues that respondents reported experiencing on the corridor, we asked the respondents to rank these 5 issue topics: traffic and congestion, vehicle safety, roadway geometry, access management, and pedestrian safety. And you can see 1 is the most important, 5 the least important. You can see the average scores that they received. Most respondents cited traffic congestion as being the #1 issue on the corridor, and then it sort of declined from there for vehicle safety, roadway geometry, access management, bike ped safety. You can see that the gap here, the way it sort of skyrockets up, means that a lot more people, it was more commonly cited as the #1 issue, whereas these other 4 issues were it was more of a mix in terms of where people ranked them. But traffic and congestion, clearly #1 concern. Another screen in the survey asked the participants to use an interactive map to drop in comments of different types of those topics: congestion, safety, and accessibility. These maps show you kind of the hotspots of where people commented. You can see in all 3, the hotspot being the blue is few or no comments, and the red being there were a lot of comments. So you can see, probably not surprisingly, the intersection with Campbell Highway and Village Highway popped up as the biggest hotspot for each of the topics that we asked you about. For congestion, other hotspots were right in front of the Rustburg Middle School, and then on the eastern end of the corridor at the intersection with Red House Road. Like I said, it's the #1 issue that respondents reported experiencing in the corridor, particularly on weekdays, mostly in the morning and the afternoon. Probably related, the afternoon congestion probably related to the 3 schools, particularly the middle school, as you can see from this hotspot. So the study corridor, Route 24 and 501, had the highest rates of congestion that people reported experiencing. And again, Rustburg Middle School is another area where congestion is seen often. In terms of safety, in addition to that main intersection there were some safety concerns, again, at the Rustburg Middle School, but sort of to the left towards the intersection with Depot Road, and sort of a lesser hotspot in front of the county administrative buildings and the public library, sort of in the middle of the corridor. So in terms of what's causing the safety issues that people were experiencing, about a third, or a little over a third, reported experiencing issues related to congestion. About 15% related issues related to sudden stops and rear end crashes. A little under 15% reported speeding as being a safety issue, and a similar amount reported aggressive and distracted driving as being issues. In terms of accessibility, how easy it is to get to the destinations along the side of the road, in terms of where those are occurring, it's a little more distributed. As you can see, there's the clear hotspot at the intersection with Campbell Highway, and another somewhat of a hotspot in front of the the shopping center with the food lion. And then you can see there kind of this cloud of comments distributed kind of throughout the middle of the corridor, from the administrative buildings over to the middle school there, the intersection with Depot Road. So a little under 20% reported experiencing accessibility issues due to, or reported experiencing it being difficult to make left turns, and accessibility issues related to vehicles blocking entrances. About 17% related to through travel and mobility. Again, with these two, you're seeing congestion is the culprit here for these accessibility issues that people reported. And about 13% reported just general difficulty accessing the businesses on the side of the road. We also, using the same screen where people dropped comments on a map, we collected the comments by the study intersections. You can see the study intersections are the ones with the white circles. In the eastern end of the corridor, or the western end of the corridor here, the intersection with Route 24 and Neal and Colonial Highways. We had 5 comments. Many of them expressed frustration with the geometry. It's a bit of an odd, very unusual geometry, sort of a Y-shaped intersection. Moving up to the intersection with Rocky Road, there were a few comments there, mainly about the middle school traffic, some suggesting that maybe a new access road behind the middle school might be necessary, might be a solution. And up to the intersection with Depot Road, there were a few comments, mostly about safety regarding people turning, vehicles making turning movements. In the study intersection with Hardin Lane, there you're getting into the sort of the downtown of the village where there are more uses. So the comments were more about congestion, concerns about drivers not yielding to pedestrians. And not surprisingly, the intersection with Campbell Highway, there were about 31 comments, much more than the other study intersections. Mostly the comments had to do with congestion. Some people suggested adding a right turn lane could alleviate the congestion. There's some issues specifically accessing some of the businesses like the Hardee's right on the corner there. There are comments about just the number of driveways for all the businesses that are clustered around that intersection and in this part of the study corridor. And then at the eastern end of the corridor, with the intersection with Red House Road, there are 7 comments. Again, largely about congestion. Some suggestions, maybe like adding a right turn lane. So that was the first survey, the first public meeting. We had 9 attendees. We heard a number of comments that could roughly fall into the categories of safety, road conditions, and placemaking. In terms of safety comments that people expressed, people were expressing difficulty walking across the street at times due to the number of vehicles and the number of driveways. Particularly, it can be hard to cross at the Hardee's, one participant noted. Someone else noted that it's important to prioritize crossing from the middle school to the library. And these, you'll see later when we present the draft recommendations, that there are pedestrian improvements that will address these comments particularly. In terms of road conditions comments, the road coming out of the Food Lion is missing pavement markings and lane designation markings. There's a draft recommendation that will address those road condition deficiencies. There's questions about the number of lanes on the road at certain points, like near the post office. And a question about whether there are any changes to Rocky Road after the new middle school project is completed. And we'll go over the potential impacts of that new project, or the middle school renovations, later in the presentation. There were also some comments about placemaking. Some people expressed seeing streetscaping elements along the corridor. There were some concerns about the overhead utilities and lighting. And there's one of the recommendations will address these comments. And with that, I'll turn it back to Bill.
All right. Well, thanks, Phil. Yeah. So we got a lot of good public feedback through the first survey effort. I think there was better than 100 people took that survey, and of course that public meeting. So now going forward here, the study intersections, a little bit about the study corridor. I think we talked about Colonial Highway to Red House Road already. That's really where we're focusing. There's 6 main intersections. However, we aren't just looking at the intersections, we're looking at the corridor as a whole. And we're also gave some consideration to the school traffic. I know that's a big issue, big concern. Started with the study effort really started with traffic. Go to the next slide, Bill. Traffic analysis, and for these primary study locations. And what you're looking at on this map is a way of rating traffic performance and delay. So green is good and red is bad. Yellow's kind of average, not too bad. Orange is starting to get pretty irritating for us, delays and concerns with rear ends and such. And this is looking out to year 2045. So we projected the volumes out that far. And what we see here, it's probably pretty intuitive for you all. You know, the village certainly is. We see some congestion around Carden, trying to get out of the side streets there, as well as at Campbell Highway. That's really the main source of congestion in the village. So this is what it's telling us, is that through time, it's only going to get worse. So we need to start planning for some improvements. So to come up with recommendations, we carefully considered public input. We performed analysis for future conditions, and we also heavily considered crash patterns and where the crashes and safety issues are. And that's what informed the improvement alternatives that we're going to share with you tonight. And this graphic here is just a way of illustrating you know, where we got a lot of the comments there in kind of the pink color, pinkish red. In the blue color there, it's where a lot of the crashes occur, heavy concentrations of crashes. So you see they largely overlap. And again, this is what we bring together to develop recommendations and informs about where we need to focus. Okay, so starting on the west end of the corridor, looking at Colonial Highway and Brookneal Highway, and as Phil was describing, and as we all know, it's a very non-standard intersection configuration. Kind of got 2 intersections real close to one another with that westbound right turn slip. So some of the feedback we heard from the public is it's confusing, it's awkward, and it does there is some congestion there. And our crash data also showed concentration of crashes here. So the recommendation.
We have a poll before you explain the recommendation. Maybe see if people have strong feelings about this intersection.
We'll have some pop quizzes like this for everybody to engage in. If everybody can take a minute and give us some feedback here.
It's like about 3/4 voted at this point. Give me a few more seconds. Okay, we've got almost everyone voted here. I'll go ahead and close that. Looks like it's actually a bit of a close.
Okay. Looks like some people are comfortable with the intersection as it is, but otherwise awkward and using the word ridiculous. But kind of a mixture of feelings here. But our intention with the recommendation here was to make this more of a standard intersection that people would normally expect. It also helps to concentrate the movements all at one location. We can control that better with just one traffic signal operation there. it performs better, and when we have a more standard configuration, which meets driver expectancy a little better, we would expect to see some crashes, decreases in crashes. And the recommendations will also include things such as some additional signage and warning of the intersection in advance, because when you're coming in from Brook Neal, you go a long ways before you come up to a signal. So we'll give some advance warning as well. So the school, we know that's a big concern, school traffic. This study kind of builds on what was already studied for school access. And what's happening with the school in its new design is really going to help the situation out there. As you can see here in this graphic, first thing is building an eastbound right turn lane into the school property off of Village Highway there. And as well, you'll notice that drop-off loop. There's a lot more distance for cars to stack up out of the road, out of Village Highway. That motion that Phil is making there. So we have a lot more stacking distance in the site. So we think that's really going to help the situation. As well, buses are going to be using a road across the back of the school. So this takes some of the bus traffic, and maybe some of the school staff might use that as well. So we start to spread the traffic load out. And this in itself, this configuration is much improved and is the major recommendation for addressing traffic at the middle school, which again, this is already in progress. So you won't see much in the study about it, except for acknowledging that this is already in progress.
We have another pop quiz about this one. Just before we get into the improvement, just to gauge how people feel about this intersection, how it functions today. About half of everyone has voted. An interesting spread here. Give it a few more seconds, see if we can get the last 20% or so to vote. Okay, I'll go ahead and close it out.
Okay, a range of answers here, and I'm guessing that your answer might depend on what time of the day you experience this intersection. There's some congestion currently, and as I shared earlier, it's only going to get worse. So came up with two alternatives here. One is to improve this conventional type intersection, right? It's the normal signalized intersection we're all pretty used to. And what we would do is, well, at present, there's just some problems there. There's not enough right turn capacity coming from the east, coming from the high school direction. And as well, the way the signal works for that northbound coming out of the shopping center and southbound coming from Lynchburg, they cannot move together. Just the way the lanes are organized, you move one side first and then the other side next. And that's an inefficient signal operation. So we have a lot of lost time with the phasing changing over, and it just causes more backup. So with this concept, we focused on the southbound approach to build an additional lane as you approach the intersection, separating out the throughs and the lefts. And as well, coming westbound from the high school, we've remarked Village Highway to create two lanes in advance of the intersection. And one of them follows through to a right turn lane. So there is some widening at the intersection there for that right turn lane. As well, you'll notice there's traffic separators included. And this does impact access to some of the side streets there. But it creates a safer condition because there in the intersection where you have people queued up, you don't have cars turning from the side streets in and out through those queues. So it's a more modern configuration. There are some property impacts and access impacts, so we want to hear your thoughts about that. But what we heard from the public, concerns with congestion, they need the right turn lane. Hardee's access causes some confusion. Drivers don't yield to pedestrians. And at present, there aren't any pedestrian features there. So the new configuration would include full, robust pedestrian features. Press a button, get the countdown head, safely walk across. In this configuration also addresses the backups. They're much shorter, much decreased wait time, and this intersection would function well out through and past year 2045. Here's one of the options. Now the next option, depending on whether or not you like roundabouts, that I can't hear any groans or any feedback of anybody, but let's acknowledge that roundabouts are at present a little different for the region. It is a much safer intersection configuration. Matter of fact, state policy tells us that when we're looking at modifying an intersection, we need to see if a roundabout works and can fit and is feasible first, because it is such a safer configuration. It eliminates T-bone crashes and the real high injury rate type crashes. At worst, you get some side swipes. So it's a safer configuration, and it slows everybody down, so the pedestrians, safe for pedestrians as well. So given the number of large trucks that traverse the intersection, this has to be a fairly good sized roundabout. With the volumes in play here, we have to have these right turn slip lanes. So we end up with a pretty substantial roundabout. This does have some significant property impacts, particularly on the north side there. You see the red hatching, and most likely, if a roundabout were to be the preferred choice and be constructed, it could result in a 100% acquisition of those parcels, since the access to them is significantly impacted, as well as just the ability to use the site. So that's our estimate right now, is that those two parcels are pretty heavily hit. So in the study, you'll see both of these options. And when you take the survey, we'd like to hear your thoughts about these as well. So I noted that with both of those configurations, we're impacting access to the side streets. And here we see that we would impact Mountain Lane, the ability to make a left in and out of Mountain Lane. So the thought here is to undertake a study to identify ways to improve a connection to Mountain Lane. So what these three yellow lines are, it just symbolizes some potential routes or alignments for new connections. This would have to be studied. We would look at things, or whoever studies it would look at things such as right-of-way impacts, environmental impacts, cost, constructability, and public feedback, public input. So there is a note here to mitigate the access change to Mountain Lane. There should be some consideration of a new connection over to Honeybee Lane. Okay, moving east along the corridor, there are heavy concentrations of crashes along this section, and this section is east of Campbell Highway, over here in front of the Food Line entrance. And in looking at the crash patterns, they're heavily concentrated around where people are making turns in and out of the side streets and entrances. And we feel that a large reason for that is that there's overlapping left turns with that two-way left turn lane. It's not real well organized for turn lanes. So we found that if we could move this food line entrance further to the west, as shown in this graphic, we could then better organize the left turn lanes, making that part of the corridor safer and mitigating some of the crash concerns that are ongoing out there. This is one of the recommendations. Okay. Yeah, there you go. So moving further east over to Red House Road, looking at the traffic volume patterns, a right turn lane is warranted for this intersection, and it would help the intersection operate better. So we're suggesting that a right turn lane should be constructed, and with that we would impact the access to the store there. But interestingly, there's some remnant right-of-way behind the store that could be used to mitigate that access impact, reworking the driveways a bit there. And of course, with this, we would also improve the pedestrian features at the intersection, upgrade the ramps and pedestrian push buttons and crossings. And that could be a nearer term solution. However, we also know that the community center is coming online there on the north side of the intersection. And it's going to be more of an activity center in the future. There's going to be more traffic coming and going from their driveway, their entrance there. And at present, it's very awkwardly lined up with the other side of Red House there. So a longer term, bigger project, and maybe this is just the project. Maybe there isn't the short term. We have to see what the funding opportunities are. But to fix this situation and get the access lined up safely, make it a real predictable intersection, and make it a better intersection, we would move Red House over to the east, so realign it, reinstall a signal, upgrade the pedestrian situation, and still preserve access by this alternative routing to the store there. This is a recommendation. A draft, I should say, all these are draft recommendations.
Yeah, before we get to the pedestrian ones, we have another poll just to see how often people walk along the corridor. Okay, almost everyone has voted. Just a few more seconds. Okay, I'll go ahead and close it out. And
Okay, so people are walking the corridor. There's a lot in the rarely category, but I wonder if it was more comfortable to walk through there. And a more walkable environment stimulates more activity on its own, maybe more community activity. There might be more people walking. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some improvements to enhance walkability and the ability to safely cross the road. So you'll see some draft recommendations that involve these types of things. One of them is looking at where we have these mid-block crossings to build a pedestrian, call them pedestrian refuges, but it's basically an island on each side there in the center turn lane. Make it more comfortable to walk. You get to the middle and you can make another decision about going all the way versus feeling like you have to go the whole way with one walk effort. So I'll point out here some of the public input. You did have 82% express an interest in additional bike and pedestrian facilities along the corridor. People expressing that they don't feel safe walking because of the traffic and the speed of traffic. Hence this type of recommendation. And this is a strategy that could be employed at different locations through the corridor. Okay, this is a excuse me. This is a busy map here. And what you're seeing on the graphic are a series of 5 strips of aerials, starting from the west side of the study area, going all the way to the east side. And the thought here is that through time, as funding and right-of-way becomes obtainable, you could widen that sidewalk out from 5 feet to 10 feet and reassign it from a sidewalk to a multi-use path. And this would allow the ability to ride bicycles in a shared environment with pedestrians and bicycles from one end of the village all the way to the other. And again, this would be a long improvement distance-wise. However, it could be implemented in phases and stages as opportunities arise. And what this looks like a little more zoomed in here. This is just a section in front of the current middle school, which all of that changes. However, the sidewalk remains. And this shows just widening that sidewalk and all of the sidewalks on that one side from 5 feet to 10 feet. We heard interest in the students being able to walk from the schools down to the library. And this type of improvement would really help with that as well. Okay, this what you're seeing here is a new road suggestion. As I mentioned earlier, the middle school project is building that road between Rocky Road and Carden Lane. But if you connect that road from Carden Lane over to Babcock on the right there, then you get a whole new parallel connection, which gives people an opportunity to take a different route. It starts to split the traffic up a little bit. Village Highway. You would have access to the shopping center there, so there would be an entrance to the shopping center. And as well, if you want to walk and bicycle, this parallel route away from the heavier traffic could be more comfortable for traversing between the schools, for instance. It could also be a way for the buses to move from school to school, minimizing their need to be on Village Highway. So we saw this as an opportunity to add some connectivity in a parallel route to the village. Okay, we did hear interest in streetscaping. This is just an illustration of what could be between Campbell Highway, for instance, and Carden Lane and Points West. The image in the upper right, it's not Rustburg, it's another community in Central Virginia that did a streetscape project sometime within the last 10 years now. Came out real nice, and it really changes the place, sense of place, sense of character in the village. It slows people down, creates a safer, more inviting walking environment. Also stimulates economic activity and investment. Get more people coming down to the village. And the discussion of streetscaping extends out to maybe even finding some additional park space, whether it's the frontages of the old and new courthouse that would all have to be looked at, or maybe some of the county parking lots on the lower side of the image here for farmers markets or other community activities. But it all works together to get more people downtown, stimulates more activity, and just really lines you up for a more attractive downtown environment. So we talk about this in the study as well. With that, let's transition over to our MetroQuest survey that we have running now. This is the second survey. David Cook will lead us through this discussion.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So let me know when that pops up. This will work. Phil, I think you have to let go. Is that?
Okay, you should be able to do it now. Yep, we can see it.
All right, good deal. So the first question you might have is, how do I actually get to the survey? The survey currently is being held at the Central Virginia TPO website. If you go to Plans and Programs and Studies, you can click on the Village Highway Study right here, and that'll bring you to the study homepage. At the very bottom, you'll see a Take Survey link here, and that'll send you over to the URL to take the survey. There are a couple of ways you can share this. You can either put in this URL up here, or you can share the survey directly by clicking on the URL up here and sharing it with others. We will provide the links for all of these in the comments for everybody to access. Currently, we're doing a targeted outreach on social media as well. Several people have already taken it. You may have already taken it as well if you've seen it on Facebook. So a lot of people have taken it just through the Facebook social media platform. If not, you can go ahead and share this website here and get others to share it with that URL. So working through the survey, the first thing you're going to see is a welcome screen. I'll kind of welcome you to the survey. You can click the check to get into it. The first screen is basically going to be a welcome screen. And with this, you're going to see a little bit about the project that we're doing, the corridor plan. You can click on a study area map that'll bring up a little illustration of the study area and the corridor overlaid on an aerial with the parcel lines. So after you've reviewed the homepage, you can click next. And this will really bring you into the meat of the survey. We have 3 slides in the middle that lay out the recommendations that were just presented by Bill. So how you're going to go about doing this is we have a series of different tabs at the top. This is all very mobile friendly as well. So when you're using your mobile phone, it's pretty easy and intuitive to go through each tab and look at the little photo of the improvement recommendation and go in and actually rate the recommendation. So starting on the western end of the corridor, at that little awkward intersection at Colonial Highway and Brookneal Highway, you can basically read about the improvement and go in and actually rate the improvement and provide a comment. This is optional. You can go in and provide any comments or feedback on this recommendation. And basically, you're just going to work through the corridor. This is going up further to the big hotspot right here at 501 and 24. So once you get here, you know, it's going to be a little bit more work to review what's going on here and providing feedback. Right here, we have the back road, the new connector road. In the Red House Road, we have the new road going around back and the realigned intersection. That would be the long-term improvement. And continuing on, we have the roundabout solution at that congested intersection again. You can see the denoted total takes on these 2 properties. Read about the roundabouts and provide your feedback and your rating, as well as the food line driveway and the 3 potential connector roads to Mountain Lane. And again, at the top, you can also click on the info button. That'll bring up some information about the survey slide you're in, and also provide just general feedback on each individual slide. On the 3rd slide, this is the last one with the survey content. You're going to look at the multimodal improvements. On the south side of the corridor here, we have the shared use path and the sidewalk on the northern end with the mid-block crossing to allow for safer pedestrian crossings along the corridor. right here. This is at the middle school location. You can see the shared use path right here, and just your general thoughts, what you think about this, and any feedback you can provide in the comment box here. And finally, for streetscaping, you can provide feedback on streetscaping, just what you think about sidewalks and crosswalk improvements throughout the corridor, tree canopy, underground utilities, etc. And finally, in the wrap up, this is going to be optional for everybody, but you can choose to answer if you live or work in the study area, and then basic demographic questions, any additional comments. And additionally, you can click on this project website right here. That'll bring you back to the page where you access the survey. Once you're done, make sure you hit the finish button right here, and that'll record your survey. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share this in the chat box for everybody and send it back over to Phil.
Okay, before we open up the floor to the discussion, well, first of all, can everyone, you can still see the slide, the Metro Quest screen? Okay, I'll just throw open one last poll to see whether or not the presentation was helpful to you understanding the projects before we go to the discussion. Just give it a few more seconds. Just under the normal amount of voters for the poll. All right, got about 3/4 of the votes, which is what we've had in the previous polls. So I'll go ahead and close that out. Looks like the presentation was pretty helpful. Good to know. And with that, can open up the floor to discussion. And you should know there, you can either, it looks like most of you are muted. You can either unmute yourself and just speak your comment, respond to it that way, or if you feel more comfortable typing your comments and questions, you can use the questions feature to type a comment to the questions box, and that'll go to us, and we can share the answer aloud. Okay, looks like we have a question. Got a few questions. So the first question is, let me expand it a little so I can see the whole thing. Do we have strategies planned to help with access and signage of the Rustburg Volunteer Fire Department?
I'll start with that. That was not specifically addressed. That is a great point, though. I will make a note to reach out to the fire department. I'm assuming that there's concern about getting in and out of their site. Rightly so. So as of now, we haven't touched that, but thank you for pointing us to it. Very helpful.
Okay, another question. Can you talk about how businesses on the Route 24 corridor will be impacted? Help with business access, and how will access be? How will it be helped with access during the construction of the projects? And do we have a time frame for the projects?
Yeah, good question. Well, first of all, I'll take the last one first. There is no time frame. All of these will require funding, design plans. They have to compete for funds. So it's, as I mentioned on the front end, it could be something of a long path, but it's got to start somewhere. Help with businesses during the construction. Construction phasing is a very important part of the design process. And there will be public hearings and interaction with abutting businesses and more meetings similar to this. So there's a whole process that'll be undertaken to address a design process, as well as the maintenance of traffic and maintenance of access through the design process. So that's a pending, be a pending thing. Then lastly, how the business on 24 corridor will be impacted. So I think there's a range of answers to this. If you're in an area that's subject to foot traffic, then one might be able to think there's going to be an improved access if sidewalks are improved and the ability to use bikes. If you're in an area that where a median's going in, as I talked about up near Campbell Highway, then it may be that there's a different route people have to take to get to your business, and that is an important element that again would need to be really worked out in design, the engineering design process, because these medians may or may not fully make it through the public process. But that's a later part of the overall. Right now we're just kind of focused on big picture and what would help to enhance and what the public would want, what citizens would want, and we document that. So that's a little bit of a longer term view, I think, with that question. If that helps.
Hi, Phil. May I ask a question?
Certainly.
Okay. My name's John Hardy, and I was wondering if beside the Rustburg Middle School area where Rocky Road is there any planned widening there? Again, buses, more traffic, plus the road that will cut behind the new middle school will add to a traffic layer that comes out on Rocky Road and spills on the 24. Do you have any planned widening there? I didn't see it. I don't know if you might go back to that frame of the plan.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So there's two answers. One is in the immediate term, with the school project, the buses will be routed around Carden, will come and go from Carden using a signalized intersection. So the thinking is that very little school traffic is going to add into Rocky Road. Again, the parking and all is focused up towards the front of the building. So unless something's changed, the last time I heard there, and Paul, maybe you can correct me here, but in the shorter term with the school, I don't think there's any immediate improvements to Rocky Road. But long term, in the study, we are going to explicitly say, matter of fact, I was working on that today, explaining that if the connection is fully made over to Babcock, then yes, Rocky would start getting more traffic, and we would suggest modifying the typical section there to come up to a more modern typical. So it's probably going to add, forget the dimension now, but there'd be some width added and some shoulder added.
I'm just thinking about those buses being able to make turns in particular also. As they come out of 24, you've got the bus parking lot that's going to be on that side. So I would imagine that there's going to be some intake and outtake of very large vehicles, also combined with your residential vehicles that people who live on that road and will be coming that way on a regular basis, especially with morning traffic.
Understood. Yeah, like I say, I think I believe there was a commitment for the school to try to minimize traffic on Rocky Road. And unless that's changed since the last time I was in a discussion several months ago, that's what I understand is again forcing all the buses through Carden. So I think the county's well aware of that, but yeah, certainly in the longer term, I would foresee probably some need to address more traffic loading onto Rocky.
Just as a reminder, you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to ask your question, or you can use the questions tool to type a question. You can also reach out to Ada Hunsberger at her email address listed here, or of course take the survey. It's a great tool for getting your input in. And again, the project website, the project webpage is hosted on the cvtpo.org under plans, programs, and studies. Looks like we have about 20 more minutes.
I have several questions.
Okay.
My name is Kirk Petrie. I currently live on Williams Road. It's right off of Rocky Road. And I grew up down here. I've moved back recently to where I grew up. And Rocky Road has needed improvement since I was in high school. That was almost 40 years ago. Okay. Now you're given access to the school from Rocky Road. And although that's not your intended purpose, if you provide it, they will use it. That's just one of the things that the stretch in front of the stretch beside the middle school has always been a problem. I mean, it's been too narrow for 40 or 50 years, and it's only worse now. That's just one of the concerns I have. The other concern, I do highway work, so I'm deeply invested in the things that I've seen you guys show. Roundabout at 501 and 24, wow. I don't think we have enough money as citizens to be able to do that. I'm just, not only that, VDOT has shown a propensity over the last several years with the new roundabouts they've created. They're not built correctly. The traffic isn't able to navigate them as it should be able to, as roundabouts in other areas like in Roanoke, coming off of 81 to get to Route 11, that one works great, works for tractor trailers, everything. I don't think it, just doing this line of work, it's not my trying to figure out the best politically correct way of saying this other than what I'm thinking. I don't think roundabouts are designed for a high volume signalized four-way intersection. It works pretty good at 24 at Concord, albeit they made the interior too wide. Anytime you got tractor trailer tires that are constantly up on the truck apron, as they call it, that means you made a mistake when you designed it. And some of the other things that I saw with your roundabout sketch, I'm trying to look at this on a mobile phone, it looked very problematic to me in doing this type of work. I couldn't imagine that. The other thing that I would like to ask is, with all of these proposed, and I will add this, there was some years ago, VDOT came down and did a I guess they did some ADA stuff with adding handicap ramps and some sidewalk. Why wasn't the 10-foot wide multi-use path broached then? They were already down there tearing it up. They could have done the work then. Nevertheless, I'm wondering, are you looking to fund this locally through a, LPA type project, or are these things all thought to be a VDOT project with federal funding traditionally, 20% federal, 80% state, or are all of these proposed ideas going to add to our tax burden? I think I just threw you enough to handle. So I'll mute.
Well, great remarks. So starting out with Rocky Road, I hear you loud and clear. We will note concern and need in the study that needs to be addressed. Let's jump to, I don't know the history of the 10-foot multi-use path. I'm not aware of that, but with the roundabout that is pretty impactful, would have to be designed fully. And they would need to be designed for the larger vehicles. So agreed that that's going to be quite a design project and construction project as well to maintain traffic while you're building that, right? And funding, I don't know if Rick or David, you want to, I could give it a go, but someone else wants to talk about funding.
Yeah, this is Rick Youngblood. As far as the funding for the projects, we have different competitive processing now through Smart Scale, through Highway Safety Improvement Program, revenue share. There's multiple different funding streams that we can utilize. For these type of projects, we would primarily be looking at Smart Scale, and how that works out is the information from this particular study would go into an application that the county would support and push forward through the state application process. And all of our projects now that you see that are built outside of some of the Highway Safety Program funding is funded through Smart Scale. And once those projects go through a competitive process, they're scored, they go through a ranking, and depending upon how they rank and the available funding in the district grant program or the state high priority program, those projects would be funded based upon the available funding. So we could have 7 projects one year, 11 projects in another year, and we run Smart Scale on a 2-year cycle. So just as an example, this past round, we're in round 4 of Smart Scale. We had just about $140 million worth of projects that were funded through the available funding. And those projects, if they are supported through the Commonwealth Transportation Board, will go into the 6-year improvement plan come this July. And you're looking at an out year of about fiscal year 26 before any of those projects would even get started as far as the PE professional engineering aspect. These particular projects, if there was a project that was pushed forward, application intake is actually next year. And then you're looking at a year after that for the scoring to take place and push forward. So even any of these projects, as far as how they might come into the system, you're looking at a start year of about fiscal year 28 for these projects to get funded through the Smart Scale program. Now, as far as quicker funding streams, HSIP, the roundabout at 24 in Doss, in that area up in Concord, was actually funded through HSIP. And those particular projects, sometimes they can come online a lot quicker. If the county's willing to do revenue share, projects can come online a lot quicker than Smart Scale. So there's various different funding streams that can be utilized as a part of that process. In regards to the roundabout design concept, the aprons are intended for trucks, larger trucks, in order to use the apron to traverse to the roundabouts. So if a truck is actually using the apron, it's typically designed accordingly for that particular purpose. And to date, we've had no significant issues with any of the recent roundabouts that have been developed in and around the Lynchburg district.
All right. Looks like we had another question through the questions box about truck traffic. Let's see. Has any thought been given to requiring larger vehicles, such as trucks, to use a more commercial route, at least if only during the congestion hours?
Yeah, the actually in state code, if it's an arterial road, you can't not allow trucks to drive on it, interestingly. So because it is an arterial facility, I don't think the Virginia state code allows you to, again, force them over to another route. You could offer another route if there was a route. We did not explore bypass routes, so that's kind of a different study, looking at bypass concepts. So no, that really wasn't part of the study. Some really good questions. Appreciate your input.
Bill, can I ask one more question?
Certainly.
I'm sorry, the picture that you have up right now just makes me think of it a lot. And that is this soft curve right here as, you know, the westbound lane here approaches Rustburg United Methodist Church. There's school construction that's going to be happening on the opposite side of the road here in the next year. I don't know if there's an opportunity to soften this curve in the future. There's a tremendous amount of accidents that happen. I've seen these electrical poles busted in half. It seems like multiple times, you know, in recent years, just about every year. Sometimes they'll fly into the sign of the church and some different things. So that curve, you know, again, right in there, I brought up that question about the volunteer fire department. So just this is a little soft curve of concern to me that I just happen to see a lot of accidents occur right in this area for some reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. We saw some evidence of that with the crash documentation. That's not in the study right now, but we were already touching on some utility relocations, trying to kind of marry those up with streetscaping opportunities. But softening this curve, that's a great thought, and I think we will provide some documentation on that.
While we wait for some more questions, I just wanted to point your attention to the chat feature. If you're able to see the chat feature, which I'm not sure whether folks on the other end can see, but if you can, David has provided quite a few links in here to the project website where you can read more about these potential improvements and existing conditions. There's a lot of good information on the project website telling you more about how we got to this point. He also provided a direct link to the survey, and additionally some information on smart scale program projects that are going on right now. So if you're able to see the chat, there's some good resources there. And if you're not able to see the chat, I am sorry, but they are all on the project website.
Right, there's another question. This one's about the utility poles.
Yeah.
When are the utility lines going to be buried? Seems like that needs to be considered regarding sidewalk placement.
Yeah, that's a great point too. The visual clutter of these overhead utilities really detracts from the sense of place. Not only that, but of course the safety issue that we were just talking about. Again, when we talk about streetscaping, that'll be mentioned just as an informational piece, and it's always uncomfortable to throw numbers around, but I will tell you that I was part of a project in another city lately where the cost to underground utilities was about $1,000 a linear foot. So that adds up pretty quickly. Certainly adds to a project cost, which is obviously why they're overhead now. But to your point, we'll work this into the discussion of the streetscaping opportunities and the benefits of incorporating changes to utility locations. Sometimes there's opportunities to move utilities back a block. So that could be another strategy. We're not looking at that in detail, but we'll make that point, and as future projects are identified, this document will inform the thinking on that. So we'll have this documented that is a desire.
And there's a question about how wide the current sidewalks are. They're typically 5 feet.
Yes, I believe they are generally 5 feet.
And there's a question, why is bicycling from the elementary school to the high school important? Once past either side of that, the bicyclist would then need to move into traffic. So I guess the question, yeah, it's about why the shared use path.
Yeah, that's this also connects to future parks and such, but really it's, there's a demand in places, it's a growing demand to be able to walk and bicycle. And we're seeing that more and more. So for those who do want to, particularly local residents, let their kids ride the bike to the schools, this creates that opportunity.
And the other consideration is in all of our studies, we're required to look at the multimodal components of the local jurisdiction, and with the residential growth that potentially could happen in and around the surrounding Rustburg area, and actually is happening in some of the outskirt areas, there will more than likely be some increased demand for even localized bicycle riding and so forth through the area.
And just a heads up, the meeting is scheduled to end at 7:15. It's about 2 minutes. Although,
It doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule if we're engaging in good conversation and a conversation period. It's well spent time. We'd like to hear as much as we can while we're together.
there's another question, a couple more questions. See, the plan proposed with the curb, grass, and sidewalk moves 12 feet into personal and business properties on the school side of the highway. I guess it's asking about how much impact there would be on private property for the shared use path.
Right. Yeah. Excuse me. We don't have a firm survey, so we're going off of the county GIS, geographical information systems, and it looks like the right of way is generally at back of sidewalk. So when I talk about phasing a project, it's about opportunities with funding. It's also about opportunities with building community support. And if ideally there'd be some consensus and people might be interested in participating in the process to a point of negotiating an acceptable agreement to either provide an easement or even right of way. And all that takes time and a lot of work and effort. But again, this is where it starts to get the idea out there, and then it gets built upon from there.
Another question here. Has the county acquired property from the fire department and the citizen services building that has been used or that has been for sale for years to build the proposed road to Garden Lane from the middle school?
No. The road would not impact that property. It's going to go behind it.
Okay. Well, I've made several notes here for us to follow up on and look into. Certainly be following up with the EMS station here, the fire station, and several other things here. So thank you very much for all your great feedback and interest. As Phil was pointing out, we've got these other feedback loops here for these links, and Ada is always available by email there if you need to reach out to her.
Yes.
Ada, any closing remarks?
Yeah, just want to say thank you to everyone that's made this happen. You know, it's been a good couple of months listening to public feedback and coming up with some suggestions on concepts. We hope that you see that, you know, we really took public input into consideration here and based our concepts and ideas off of that. And so going forward, you know, the more people you can get to take the survey, we would really appreciate. You know, we want to hear from as many people as possible. Again, I'm available by email, and my contact information is here and on the project website. So if there's any other questions, comments, concerns, we would be happy to address those via email. So thank you everyone for coming, and have a great night.
And just to close off, hey, this is Rick Youngblood. You know, Eve, Kirk, John, you know, I know you guys and see you often in Rustburg. If you got any questions or concerns, feel free to just catch me there when we see each other.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I'll catch you next time I see you.
All right,
If I ever see you at VDOT again.
we always catch each other in Rustburg, so that's all good.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
Take care.
All right. Take care.